Hello, everybody. Adrian Plass here.
Yes, and Bridget. Hello.
And this time we think we've got the number right, but who knows? I think it's number 241 in Sounding the Shallows. The Shallows must about be sounded by now, mustn't it?
Well, after a week like we've all just had in this world, I'm not sure whether anything.
What on earth can you be talking about?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, last week everything was tentative. I mean, in theory, there was going to be a ceasefire. In theory, Trump was going to be the next president and nothing was going to disrupt that. And those two things are now in the past, although actually, I think a lot of people feel very uneasy, not very confident about the ceasefire, quite disturbed. Maybe most people I know anyway, quite disturbed about what's happening in America. And then just yesterday, there was the sentencing of a teenager in this country who carried out something that's beyond understanding, way beyond the comprehension of even thinking about the ceasefire or Ukraine and Russia or Trump or anything. A teenager who set out to kill as many children as he could. And so it's been a really turbulent week, hasn't it?
Yeah, I can hardly think about that. I saw it in the news and listened to it, and I can't get my head around it. I was thinking, I mean, that's so horrible that everything else pales against it. But the ceasefire thing, the fact that everybody's been waiting for so long, and they keep trying to get it to happen, and it does and it doesn't, and then it fails and all the rest of it. So who knows what will happen this time. But I was thinking about change in our lives because I think it's true to say, isn't it, that looking back, some people say I had a plan and I pursued the plan and step by step we got there. Well, I can't recall ever doing that. Except going to a restaurant or something.
No, we had a plan.
Did we?
Yeah, I mean, having worked with children for 3 years, we had a plan that it couldn't continue. You had to do a teaching degree in order to be able to pursue it. We did have a few.
We did that then. Yeah.
Plans.
Yes, I know. But the things that result in totally unexpected things. I was thinking back, do you remember, and I'm sure a lot of the people listening, not just in this country, but in many countries over the world, there was a time when the TV ran out about midnight. There were no more programs. And what you sometimes got, and nearly always got in England, was a little tiny religious program where one person talked to camera, usually not very convincingly, about usually his faith. I was going to say his or her, but I think mainly men, but maybe it was...
And then it was the last program because advertisers did not want to advertise around a religious program, and therefore it was always the very last program.
Yeah, that's right. And when we were working down in Sussex, we read a thing in the newspaper. I don't know if you remember this. You have to follow me here and see if you remember all these things I thought of. We saw something in a newspaper about a new religious program in that part of England, which was TVS, Television South. And they were looking for people to be part of this program. Now, the bit I can't remember is what we did then. Did we write to them?
I think we wrote to them, both of us. And what I think, if I'm honest, was that we liked the idea. They said that interviews and auditions would be held in London. And I think both of us loved the idea. It was tough work, what we were doing, and of having a day out, going up to London, expenses paid.
Well, I don't think we had any idea what it would be, did we?
No, but we had both been to the theatre school years before that. So we both of us had a little feeling that maybe there was something interesting and exciting in this idea.
Anyway, we prepared some pieces and we wrote to them. I don't know if you or I wrote to them, and they said, come up to London and bring some pieces you've written, and we'll record you, in a studio somewhere. And I have to say, I was pretty terrified, really, Because although we had some experience of speaking in various ways, acting and whatever, I didn't feel I had any real experience of that. Well, we did go. We went on a train, and
We did.
we went and did it. And I think the things we did were not terribly appropriate because they were looking for people to have a conversation late at night, weren't they? But that didn't matter so much. But we did our pieces and we went home and they didn't say whether we'd been successful. But the next thing that happened was that
quite a challenge for both of us in a way.
Well, yes, it was. Because they said they wanted you.
That's right.
And so that was that.
Yes, well, they already had 4 men lined up, didn't they? Including a bishop and an Anglican vicar and somebody who was quite controversial and a Jewish rabbi.
Yeah.
And so I think the idea of having a youngish woman wasn't a bad addition to that.
Yeah.
And there was a nun as well, wasn't there?
Yeah.
So then there was me.
But then I knew, and don't tell me I'm wrong because I have been wrong many times, but I was right about this. I knew you would feel terrible about the fact that you were doing it and I wasn't.
Absolutely awful.
And for one of the
because you were the one who'd really wanted to do it.
Well, I did want to do it.
And I'd just gone along because it seemed like a nice idea.
That's right. And one of the few times in my life, I mean, you're a sort of genuinely generous person. I have to fake it sometimes. But on this occasion, I thought I am going to subdue my a mixture of frustration and annoyance, and I really wanted to be in it. And so
I wasn't so bothered. That's
I
right.
know, but I wanted you to be able to do it, and so that's how it began. And you began to do it, and then not long after that, they decided they would ask me as well. So there we are, both of us, going up once a week to the studios in. Where were the studios?
Well, it started being in Gillingham, and then it moved to near Maidstone.
That's right, yeah. And it was ridiculously exciting, really, wasn't it? We were like children because you had to take a change of clothing because you were going to record how many evenings?
Well, it was 7 evenings, which each person was probably in 5 of them.
I'm not sure it was 7, but anyway.
And it was 5-minute programs sitting round a kitchen table.
That's right.
Discussing something that had been kind of thought about the night before. Yeah. That's essentially
so
what it was.
every time we'd done one, which was about 5-6 minutes long, no more, we would have to run off up to the changing rooms and put our other clothes on. And we only had about 2 changes of clothes.
I think I went to an enormous number of charity shops for both of us at that time.
But it felt good, didn't it? And the atmosphere of the studio, the darkness and the studio lights. I think you'd done a bit of television before at theatre school where you were there. You did a
what?
You did a program for people to see if they'd like to do it later on. I remember.
Oh, I did a pilot.
Yeah,
program,
pilot.
Yeah.
And but I haven't even been in a studio, I don't think. So it was exciting, and just sitting around the table there, it didn't seem as though it's going to amount to much, but. It was,
and it was a contrast to our lives. That's the truth of it.
True.
We had 3 boys. I was working half-time. You were working full-time in a children's centre, and it was really tough, I suppose. And this was a little bit of glamour. Let's be honest. I don't think the other people taking part necessarily thought of it like that. For us, it was quite exciting. Yeah.
No, it was fun to do, and also they used to give us cash, didn't they, for our train fares, and they said it doesn't matter how you got here, whatever it was, we give you the second-class rail fare, which for us at that time seemed like an awful lot of money. But then,
yes, I mean you're talking about change. Now that in itself didn't change our lives at all, did it? We were both still doing the same jobs we were doing. One challenge happened, which was that when you got to a point of deciding that you were going to give up smoking, which was a big thing for you, by announcing it, you thought, and I remember, you thought, well, anybody in the southeast might just possibly be watching
Some
this
taxi
programme.
driver or
Yes, or insomniac.
pub manager
Yes.
or insomnia.
Yes,
Yeah.
because it was very late at night. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, that feeling that you had put it out there, and it
Yeah.
did help
That's
you,
right.
didn't it?
By the way, I
actually?
should mention that my older brother was asleep somewhere. I can't remember where. And he said he woke up and saw my face on the television and thought I can't remember, he said he thought he'd gone to hell or heaven, but
I can imagine.
some other place. So, yeah, that's right, because I tried many ways. I was sort of smoking about 60 a day then.
Yeah.
And
It wasn't about, it was at least.
at least, yeah. And so I just, I thought that was just a way of moving forward with it, I suppose. But we did meet interesting people. I mean, my closest friend and I had always wanted to meet Malcolm Muggeridge. We wanted to invite him to tea.
Really?
Yes, which is a bit of a hero in some ways because his journalism and his writing was so amazing. They really, really were. He wrote like an angel, as someone said. So we met him on that one of those programs. He came just for the one program.
He did. I mean, that was a very unusual situation because he was really elderly by that time, and we, with the producer of the program, went to meet him in his home, didn't we? And he and his lovely wife Kitty were sitting by the fire, and they couldn't quite remember whether it was radio or TV.
That's
So
right,
she
yeah.
went off to pack a few clothes, and in actual fact, she couldn't see very well, and the clothes that had been packed were a bit ragged, and so the TV people were struggling with this sort of hero of journalism who had very frayed shirts, and
Yeah,
how could
that's
they
right,
sort it out? But that for you, I mean, it was just the most
It was very meaningful,
amazing
really.
thing, wasn't it?
I remember we had a prayer meeting in his house. We met in his house before we went up. And I don't think Malcolm Muggeridge was used to praying aloud in a meeting like that. It's a very kind of evangelical thing in a way. But
Yeah, well, that's where we were at.
he prayed the Lord's Prayer, do you remember? And then while we were there, I only say this because it affected my writing from then on, we went into his study and he said, this is where I sit, this is where I write. And what I do is I write 1,000 words every day, and I correct those 1,000 words. So by the time I reach the end of the day, I have a completed piece of work.
I think he also said, unless I'm putting words into his mouth, but I think he also said it was always good to finish on a moment in what you were writing where you knew what you were going to be able to jump off on the next
That's
day.
right. Where you thought, I don't want to stop here.
Yeah.
I want to write something else.
And actually, I suppose something happened in you, something stored away. I mean, we're always banging on about seeds being sown, aren't we? But at the time, there was no thought that you were going to be a writer. It was all to do with the next day working with kids who had quite a lot of problems, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In a secure unit in Sussex. So, but somehow I think that pattern did get lodged in you. And when you did later on
Well,
start
it was such
to write,
a good pattern for me,
Yeah.
actually. I mean, obviously I was influenced by the fact he was an incredibly famous writer and I was a nothing. But I liked it. I liked the idea that you had an end to your efforts and that you ended on as he put it, I think on a high, you know, you ended at a point where you thought, I could go on if I wanted, but I'll leave it till tomorrow. Yeah, so... Yeah, it's good.
I mean, apart from anything else, let's be honest, when you started writing, Adrian, you were writing by hand. So, you know,
Yes,
flying
it was.
over keyboards is not what you were doing. And I would say that your writing style was a little laborious.
Yes, I do write like a 4-year-old, which is a bit of a handicap. Although I have to say to all those who have criticised my handwriting, who are many, that I once got 16 out of 15 at school for the quality of my handwriting. I think it was, I can't remember which teacher at Skinner's School in Tunbridge Wells.
Are you sure it wasn't the infant school?
No, he gave another boy 15 out of 15, and then he looked at mine. And he was a great bloke, actually. I really liked him. And he said, well, I gave him 15, and I think yours is marginally better. So I'm giving you 16 out of 15. So,
And you've hung on
yeah,
to
we
that
are.
story ever since,
Well, I have to
Adrian.
because my writing is so
No,
bad.
but I mean, it was one of the many things that I think lodged in us from that time without realising that they were things that we were going to come back to. I mean, I mean, you talk about Malcolm Muggeridge, but the other extraordinary hero for you was meeting David Watson. And the interesting thing about that was that without you realizing it, there was going to be a bit of a. He was at a major crisis in his life, wasn't he? I mean, he had been diagnosed with cancer, and despite a huge amount of prayer, was pretty sure that actually he was going to die. And what we didn't know was that there was going to be a crisis in our lives. I mean, when I look at those little programs, which you can find somewhere or other on YouTube, we had no idea that a crisis was going to happen in our lives and a major change was going to happen. We were listening to changes in other people's lives.
Yeah, I know. I looked at those programs. I look like a boiled potato sitting at the table.
You do
look
not.
all right.
You do not. But that's not what we're talking
No,
about, is it? So when you did have to finish work because of a major stress illness, it was very important to you, this little studio sitting around the table, wasn't it? They were very
it's
good
very
because they
safe.
hung on to
Those
you.
who've been in one of these studios, they're very quiet and they're dark and they're very concentrated. And it is like being on another planet somehow.
And
so,
for 5 minutes,
yeah,
you could be you for a little while, despite all the chaos going
That's
on.
right,
So
yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
yeah.
But I don't think, as I say, we're looking at these huge changes in the world. But I'm sure for the people in Israel, the people in Gaza, the people, I don't know about the people in America at the moment, but it's the next day of their lives. It's not the radical change that is talked about in the press. It's the next day. And for you, the next day would be that you started to write in our upper room, our upstairs lounge, and then I sent off anything you'd written to any magazine because I was told that's what you do. And the next stage for you was not a major change. It was small and significant, wasn't it?
There were significant things that happened. One was that someone had said, I need to go around all the bookshops, the Christian places, and read the things people have written in Christian magazines.
Yes, they did.
And I did that. And I did write one or two articles that were really two of the worst articles I've ever read, I think. And I realized after a while that the crucial thing, the absolutely crucial thing, was to write from inside me and not from inside somebody else, or to shore up anyone else's view of the way things are. And that was
And the interesting thing is, when you finally did get asked to write a book, it wasn't about you or what you thought. That was the idea. It was about this program company.
Join
It
the
was
company.
called Join the
Yeah,
Company,
yeah.
and it was very much talking about other people's stories. And
Well, it was an odd mix because there was a bit about my childhood.
Well, no, I was
which
going to
was
say,
gratuitously vulnerable.
yeah,
And then about individuals who'd we'd met through the program.
but
It's a lumpy book.
I mean, the book, it was lumpy because it was the first time that you maybe had explored your own story. I mean, we don't explore our own stories much, really. We try to, but you had an opportunity which you didn't even realize, because while in between writing about other people, it was then called The Growing Up Pains of Adrian Plass,
Well,
after the Sacred
other one I
Diary.
wrote,
Yeah.
yes,
Simply because there was a Growing Up Pains of Adrian Mole.
Yeah.
So the book became The Growing Up Pains of Adrian Plass. And there were quite a lot of growing up pains, weren't there?
Yeah.
That you got into you didn't intend to shove it all into this book, but because you'd started writing, and because you didn't have other pressures on you, like being a social worker every day, you went right back to the beginning. And I remember
That's right,
some of the
yeah.
things that you wrote, I thought at the time, well, this is a bit of an odd book.
Well, I think I'd read somewhere that, I can't remember what his name was, Read something, an American writer, that said writing is easy. You just sit down at a typewriter and you open a vein.
Yeah.
And that also has a lot of value in it. I think I slightly overdid it, but
Yeah, but you were still being affected by people as well. So you did an interview with Hugo Green about being in Auschwitz. You
That's
did
right,
other
yeah.
interviews with people who were not well known, but just getting into their stories.
Yeah, I loved it.
You
Absolutely,
absolutely loved it. Yeah, yeah,
Yes, I did.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I just am fascinated by what we call change.
Well, after that, I mean, we couldn't have known that through the writing and through people knowing who I was at one point, we were invited to do things we'd never dreamed
No.
of doing.
And that's where we were on the sidelines of seeing people bringing about incredible change in children's lives through World Vision and through Toy Box. And the
you remember
more
when
we
we-
listen to people, the more we realize that everybody's life had a story.
That's right. Remember, we had thought we would never go to South America. No, there's no reason to
I'm
think
only
we
laughing
would.
because when we were asked to go to Bolivia, I thought it was in Europe. I thought
Oh,
it was
well done,
Bulgaria,
yeah.
so that wasn't very helpful.
So this man came up to me at a meeting and said, "Would you like to go to Peru next year?" And
No, and Bolivia, because
and I
you
said,
came home and
I
said,
said yes. Yeah, and I came home and said, "We're going to Peru and Bolivia next year."
yes, but I mean our experiences. I mean that work is still going on with the same people still involved. So catching on the edge of other people's changes in their lives has been perhaps the most exciting thing that I would say that we've managed to be involved in, really.
I looking. People always talk about looking back, and they often say, "Oh, when you look back, you can see how it developed," but not really. And a lot of things were encounters with individuals and
Yeah.
moments when things happened for no reason that you could really see.
Yeah, and that is a lovely thing. I mean, we're going to finish, aren't we? But for anybody listening to this, maybe to just go over your life a bit. And obviously there are mess ups. I mean, we haven't talked about those particularly in this program, but there are. But at the same time, people we meet, situations we meet, that produce a change that isn't like a radical somebody else becoming president of the United States or a rather scary, vulnerable ceasefire or whatever, but they are changes that change us.
I certainly
that's
would
what
say,
changes
looking
are.
back, I would say go for things. I don't mean indiscriminately, but don't be too frightened if you can help it to do something that perhaps you never thought you would.
And
do.
listen to the
And
people you
really
meet.
listen. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear from you any of these things that we've talked about. A response to would be great.
Yeah.
And we'll talk to you next week.
Bye bye.